The premise history portal on the CFD web has been modified in order to make premise histories more accessible and to ensure that they are reviewed by a district chief before being sent to dispatch for entry into the CAD. This tutorial will cover those changes. You'll access the portal the exact same way that you always have, through the premise history alert link. You will sign in. When you sign in, you will notice the fields that need to be completed before entry. Your name is at the top. This field cannot be altered. Start date, company, street number, street name, the suffix for the street, of course the premise history itself, and also this new field, this district chief field. They are all required fields. So we're going to enter a start date for our premise history. You don't have to enter an end date if you don't know it, but we're going to for the purpose of this tutorial. You'll select your company. Then you will enter street number, street name, street suffix, and comments. So after you've completed those fields and you've entered in your premise history, you will then send this to your district chief for review. This is important. Without a district chief reviewing the premise history, it will not be sent to the CAD. So we're going to pick a district chief. So Lieutenant Anson Turley, who's working at Truck 2, is sending this premise history to his district chief, Anson Turley, who's working in District 4. Lieutenant Anson Turley is going to submit this premise history. And that ends this part of the process for Lieutenant Turley. When a company officer sends the district chief a premise history that needs to be reviewed, that district's chief will receive an email, this email. The email will state in the title or the subject the company from which it came, when it was sent, the fact that it needs to be reviewed, the link to follow in order to review this premise history, and who sent the premise history to the district chief. In the body of the email will be the premise history itself. So the district chief shall look at the premise history, review it, state that that's okay, and then proceed to this link in order to send it to dispatch in order for them to enter it into the CAD. So this link takes him right back to the premise history alert page where the district chief will sign in. It's important to remember that the premise history for review was sent by Truck 2. So you will pick Truck 2 from the pick list and hit Submit under the View by Company tab. Doing this will actually bring up every premise history that Truck 2 has active in the CAD, including those that need to be reviewed, located at the top. Green means that a premise history has been sent to the premise history group. Basically, the premise history group are the two people who work in dispatch who actually add these things into the computer. So if it's green, that means it's already been sent. The fact that these lack color, have no fill color, mean that they need to be reviewed, and at the very top of the list you will see 1234 Main Street with an ID number of 3799. The district chief has decided that this needs to be sent on because it's appropriate. To send it to the premise history group, he will click Send to PH. This will send the premise history to CAD or to dispatch so that they can enter it into the CAD. When that happens, notice the premise history turns green, meaning it has been sent to the premise history group, and Laura and Larry, who work up at dispatch, are very, very meticulous about entering premise histories as soon as they receive them. What is the process if a premise history is no longer valid and needs to be taken out of the CAD? The company officer who wishes to make a premise history inactive will follow this workflow. I'm Truck 2 Lieutenant Turley again. So I pull up all of my premise histories. I decide that this premise history, which just happens to be our sample test premise history, needs to be taken out of CAD. All I have to do is click inactive and send make checked records inactive. This sends that premise history to the premise history group, and it notifies them to take it out of the system. That's easy. It does not have to be sent for review by a district chief. The company officer knows if it applies still or does not. It's a simple, very simple 1 or 2 step process. Find the premise history on the list of premise histories that apply to you. Click inactive and send by clicking the tab or the button, make checked records inactive. That's how you take a premise history out of the CAD. To conclude this tutorial, we're going to cover some points that may not have been covered in the first 3 sections. We're also going to highlight the main points from the tutorial in order for you to get the most out of this. The purpose of this portal is so that the company officer has what they need in order to do their job. And for that reason, you can search any company in the city. Primarily, you'll work with your own premise histories, but you can search any company in the city, come in, and look and see what premise histories are currently on record. We've set them up so that the most recent are entered at the top. So let's say every Monday you want to review the premise histories and remove the ones that no longer apply. You can start at the bottom and work forward. Also, I want to mention this, the view hide comments. Of course, the comment field is what contains the premise history. It's easier to look through that with just the address and the company and the date. But if you want to see what the actual premise history states, you'll toggle this and the comments will become available. Another thing I'd like to mention is the ID number for the premise history. If 2 premise histories have the exact same address, the ID number is the unique identifier that allows you, if needed, to delete one and not the other, and to know for certain that you are deleting the proper premise history. No 2 premise histories should have the same ID number. So for instance, 2424 Beekman, it's a severe hazard. This has 2196. This one at 2424 Beekman says it's the Talbert House, it's vacant, and the fire department connection is located on the B side of the building. Well, let's say we no longer needed this one. Be sure you delete 2178 and not 2196. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But for now, this will end the tutorial on the Cincinnati Fire Department's Premise History Alert Portal.
Meet me on the other side. Meet me on the other side. I'll see you on the other side.